Part 1.
You will hear two university students talking about a music course. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3.
Josie, come in. How are you?
I'm good.
Can I get you a coffee or anything?
No, that's okay. I can't stay long, but you said you wanted to talk to me about that course I'm doing this semester. Music 103?
That's right. Actually, I was a bit confused because I thought you were majoring in maths.
That's right, I am. I'm doing 4 maths modules this year, but it's an optional course. You just choose it if you're interested. And you can do it whatever department you're in. Why? Are you thinking about doing it?
Well, I'm not sure. What are the requirements?
What?
The course requirements. I mean, what do I need to know about music to be accepted on it? I do listen to a lot of music, everything from hip-hop and rap to classical. And I can sing, sort of.
Well, for a start, one special thing about this course is that it's distance learning. You don't actually have to be at the university to do it, and you don't have lectures. So you've got to be able to work on your own without someone telling you what to do all the time.
Oh? Oh. No, that should be okay, I reckon. I'm more worried about the actual musical stuff. Like, I don't know how to read music.
That doesn't matter. They don't assume that. You'll learn as you go along. How's your maths?
Not too bad.
Right. Some of it's quite mathematical, so you really need to be strong there.
But you play the violin, don't you? I don't play anything.
You don't need to. What about computer skills? You're okay there?
Yes, reasonably. Does that matter?
Yes, I'd say they're essential. Like I said, it's all distance learning, so it's computer-based.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10.
But what about lectures?
You don't attend any. It's all online. So lots of the students aren't here in Canada at all. They're studying from home all over the world. We've got someone from my group in Jamaica and a couple from Taiwan. Oh, and some from Hong Kong as well.
So, how does it work?
Oh, well, there's a multimedia course website on the internet where you can listen. You can listen and watch at the same time. And of course, you can do it at your own pace. So if you don't understand something, you just go back. Or if you want some more examples of the music, there are links there to things that you can listen to. There's quite a lot of theory, but it's all done through musical examples, so it's practical at the same time. Like in the last module I did, we looked at a bit of the music from the movie Star Wars. The Darth Vader theme, you know.
Dum, 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 dum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we looked at a theme from Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. Do you know it? Written in the 1850s. And we could see there were all sorts of parallels between them. And that's a feature of the course. We often look at modern Hollywood themes to illustrate concepts in classical music.
It sounds really interesting. Do you have a course book?
No, we don't use one. We're given a software program called Notability Lite. And what it does is it presents what we write, the music we write, really clearly. And it also allows us to play back any piece of music on our computer at home. But that's not all. We can write our own music, quite complex stuff for various instruments, and the program plays it back to us.
Plays the actual music?
Yes, so it means that your computer is actually your own musical instrument. And we can even submit our finished pieces to our tutor by email.
So you do need your own computer, obviously.
Yes, with at least 64 megabytes of RAM.
That's okay. I've got 128.
Oh, and a CD-ROM and a sound card, of course.
No problem. So, how long is the course?
It's 6 months. There are 2 a year, so you could actually enroll for the next one if you wanted. It starts in January. I started last September and I finish in February.
And how many credits is it?
3. In order to pass, you've got to do 6 assignments. I'm just doing my 4th one now, and take a final examination. Oh, anyway, why don't you call round sometime and I'll show you the sort of things we do. You can even listen to some of my music.
That would be great. Well, thanks, Josie. Now, are you sure you don't have time for that coffee?
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a tour leader giving information about a bus tour. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 11 to 15.
Thank you for choosing City Tours. The reason so many people choose our tours when visiting this city is because you can design your tour to suit your own interests. Your all-day pass entitles you to board our bus at any stop and stay as long as you like at each place. The all-day bus pass costs $18 for adults. Children between the ages of 5 and 12 pay half the adult fare, and children under 5 ride for free. Our buses run every hour on the half hour, starting at 8:30 a.m. Our most popular tour is the Centre City Tour, which goes to all the major attractions in the centre of the city. From the starting point here at the tour bus office, the bus goes to the first stop, Hill Park. As you may guess, this park is located at the top of a small hill. The next stop is the fishing docks. Following that, the bus goes on to the third stop, Bay Bridge, located at the foot of the bridge which crosses the bay. The fourth stop is in the shopping district. Then the fifth and last stop is at Green Street.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
There are many interesting things to do and see on the Centre City Tour. At the first stop, you can enjoy a spectacular view of the bay, the city, and especially of the fishing docks, which are located at the foot of the hill. At the second stop, you can walk around and look at the boats. Fresh fish from the bay is also for sale here, since this is the place where the fishermen bring in their catch. The next stop is where some of the city's finest seafood restaurants are located, so you might want to plan a lunch stop here. You can eat fresh fish here, prepared in the traditional local way. The fourth stop is, of course, where you can do your shopping. Don't miss the opportunity to purchase some of our city's famous handmade baskets. You'll want to take several home as souvenirs of your visit to our city. Finally, at the last stop on the tour, you can visit one of the oldest buildings in our city, the theatre. This building was built over 400 years ago and is still used today as a place to see plays, musicals and other performances, as well as our annual film festival.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear two university students discussing their course and a project they are doing together. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Martin.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
Fine. I'm relieved to have done my presentation.
I'm sure. How did it go?
Oh, okay in the end, but I was ever so nervous beforehand. It's silly because I do know my stuff quite well. I must know those statistics inside out. But when you have to get each table of results to come up in the right order, it can make you nervous. It was my first time using the computerized projector, and I was sure I was going to get the controls wrong or something. And, of course, that's not a good situation if you know you've got to listen to questions carefully and be ready to answer quickly.
But it was fine once you got going.
Yes.
I do feel that the standard of presentations could be improved in general. I think a lot of the lecturers agree with me, although I don't honestly know what they can be expected to do about it. Students need to appreciate the difference between style and content. Too many presentations are just a mass of detailed content, all very worthy, without any attempt to engage people's interest. Basic things like looking at your audience's faces seem to get forgotten, and that makes it harder to concentrate on the points made about the research itself.
Yes, there are quite a few improvements I'd like to see. Take tutorials, for example. I feel they're often a missed opportunity. I come out not feeling sure about what I've learnt. Week in, week out, I faithfully plough through the reading list, which is fair enough, but then the discussion doesn't seem to extract the main issues. It's frustrating.
I know what you mean. Mind you, we have to take some responsibility ourselves. I actually got quite a lot from that skills workshop I went to on taking notes, and I'd like to make similar improvements in the next semester. The reading list we get has several websites each time, and I want to learn to navigate my way round them more effectively.
Now, that sounds a good idea. Mind you, it means spending more time in the library.
If you can get in.
You mean because it's too crowded? It isn't big enough, is it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like to work late in the evening, and it shuts before I want to finish. But I know you can access the catalogue from a laptop.
Which, personally, I haven't got. Actually, the problem for me is that I like to get up early and start work straight away, and they don't start until 9. I wish they'd change that.
Now you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 26 to 30.
Look, We ought to start working out what to do next for our project.
Yes, enough moaning.
OK. The main thing is to allocate the various tasks between us, isn't it?
Yes. Well, we're going to need the questionnaire before we can do much else, aren't we? Do you want to handle that?
I'd assumed we'd do it together.
Well, you have more experience than me. Maybe you could think up the main questions, you know, a first version of the whole thing, and then I could read it through.
And make suggestions? Well, OK. My experience on projects has all been with closed groups. I don't really know how you go about selecting subjects from larger populations.
Actually, it's quite straightforward. You use tables of randomised numbers.
Could you show me?
Yeah, I'll take you through the process. That way you'll learn and I'll feel surer for having someone else there. Now that brings us to the interviews themselves.
Right. Would you like to do them? Or are there too many?
Well, your typing's pretty fast, isn't it? So if you agree to handle the transcribing afterwards, I'm prepared to do the face-to-face stage. Does that sound fair?
It does to me. But tell me if you find it takes longer than you thought.
And vice versa. And when we get the results all together, they'll need to be run through statistics programs, won't they? Now, that's where I always feel a bit unsure about which tests are the correct ones to choose.
Same here. But we can get advice from the lecturers about that. Shall we do all that as a joint effort?
I think it'd make us feel more secure about what we were doing.
Yes, it would be terrible to get that wrong after all the hard work leading up to it.
And then we've got to present the whole thing to the group. Will you feel up to doing that?
I think we should do a joint presentation. It's all both our work after all.
I guess you're right. But would you mind getting the slides and so on ready? I find that takes me ages and still doesn't look any good.
Whereas I quite enjoy that kind of thing. OK. Now, we need to think about a few...
The end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You will hear a writer giving a talk about the different kinds of writing that the audience might want to try doing. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
So, I'm now going to say a few words about the various different kinds of writing you may want to consider. Each has its own challenges and rewards, and it's really a question of seeing what suits you best. There are no rights and wrongs here. Let's start by considering the short story. Remember that a short story isn't just a very concise novel. There are 3 basic styles: the story itself, the slice of life section, and the surprise type, and all of them are equally valid as treatments of the genre. When producing a short story, you don't have time for a slow build-up of interest, so you need to get in there straight away and begin with a crisis. Then there's non-fiction, which can sell very well, with biographies in particular frequently hitting the bestseller lists. It's important, however, to be sure your chosen topic is genuinely interesting to people, and you know enough about it to do it justice. So when you're submitting your idea to a publisher, it's worthwhile to give them details of specialist knowledge you have. What about articles? Now, this is a very wide area, of course, going from the very learned and obscure to the populist gossip type. Articles based on giving advice are a proven area, and to give them a sufficient focus, you should produce your article for a definite market. That will help to define your purpose. Turning to something different, there's the question of poetry. It's often hard to define what poetry is exactly. Maybe it's easier to say what it isn't. But it should be subtle, so the message of a poem oughtn't to be overly obvious. True poems let the ideas sit there for the reader to ponder. What they must do is sound good, like singing. So I recommend reading what you write aloud to yourself to check the melody. Well, then there's plays, which are basically novels, but told only through conversation. A playwright includes minimal instructions for actions, but not for every small action the actors will perform. Things such as moves towards sofa and so on are for the director to come up with. If you're thinking of trying your hand at a play, a good starting point would be to educate yourself a little in the art of acting, so that you know what the people who deliver your work can and can't do with it. What next? There's radio, of course. Radio uses an enormous range of material, and the BBC Writing for Radio Handbook contains information about all of this. To begin with, I suggest regional stations for sending your stuff to. The competition for national radio is extremely high. OK, another interesting area is children's literature. Now, very few, if any, children's books are published without pictures, but this doesn't mean that you, as writer, have to draw them. That's for the illustrator. What you do need to do is be clear who you want to write for. So fix on one age group, and then aim your stories at that. Right, I've saved what I consider to be the best and the hardest till last, the novel. Very long and very difficult to do well, but certainly not impossible, as any bookshop shelves will confirm. One of the first things to decide is from what point of view you will tell your story. A popular choice is the first person, and this technique certainly gives a sense of immediacy for the reader, while many new writers find it easier to project themselves into their main character if they can write in his or her name. But that assumes, of course, that the main character is somehow like the writer, which may or may not be the case. Meanwhile, if your book is all narrated by I, you can only put into your story things which are experienced by that character, which may prove to be rather restricting. Now, there are all sorts of pitfalls for the novelist, and many of them relate to the issue of providing a balanced narrative. Every time you introduce a character into the story, you have decisions to make. Of course, you want to populate your landscape with a variety of people to maintain interest, but don't feel you have to decorate every one of them in elaborate detail. The same goes for irony. All too often, an inexperienced writer will create a strong ironic situation and then spoil it by spelling out what they mean by it, as if readers were too stupid to understand. A few contrasting details should serve to make the point clear. A big challenge for new novelists is dialogue. What is the relationship between conversation as people really speak and as it is in novels? Well, it depends. If you recorded actual conversations and copied them straight into your narrative, readers would get confused and bored, all those unfinished sentences going nowhere. On the other hand, you don't want to write out page-long utterances by characters, as these will seem unrealistic to an extreme, but you can insert minor descriptions and actions to vary the pace and add interest. Well, I hope what I'm saying is encouraging and not too off-putting about the various difficulties. Are there any questions at this point?
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.